All right, well, it is 12 o'clock, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikhil Schneider. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Coordinator here at CSUN, and today I'll be talking about transportation at CSUN. Just a quick housekeeping item, everyone is muted by default, but if you find your Zoom control panel on the far left of that, will be a little unmute button. So if you do have a question and are called upon to ask the question, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that. We'll be taking questions throughout, and I'll try to address them as they pop up. You're also free to type your question into the chat if you want to pose it that way. Austin will be keeping an eye on those and be letting me know whenever a question is posed. Also, if you're able to see the participant list and the chat in between those two windows, there will be a little raise hand button. And that's another way you can ask a question. So if you click raise hand, then Austin will let me know. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. And I'll be, once again, trying to address those throughout. So worst case, I'll just say, I'll get to that in a few slides. So let's jump right into it. Transportation at CSUN. So just a quick agenda, what we'll be going through today, starting off with an overview of transportation as it relates to CSUN's greenhouse gases. Then I'll dive into some of our population and commuting data. Spend some time talking about CSUN's various transportation initiatives, and then lastly, give you a sneak peek of our upcoming transportation dashboard. All right, this is severely messed up in terms of its display, and I'm not sure why. Anyways, I can describe it to you easily enough. We are looking at a pie chart of CSUN's 2019 greenhouse gas emissions. This big yellow slice right here would be our purchased electricity. About 31% of our emissions came from electricity. I want to say another 9% of this blue slice with natural gas. About 1% came from refrigerants, this little gray slice right here. And then the lion's share of our emissions, about 55%, I believe, came from transportation. So breaking out that transportation piece, this orange slice right here, actually this orange slice is 55% of our emissions. And that is all from commuting, student commuting predominantly, but also faculty and staff as well. And then these, lost my cursor. This little bottom slice right here is from university funded travel. So if you get reimbursed for mileage for a trip, if the university pays for you to go somewhere via a conference, and then that other little red slice down here would be on campus travel. So, PPM's vehicles driving across campus, things like that. So whenever we talk about transportation from a sustainability perspective, one of the key focuses of that is our greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the reasons, I guess, that the transportation takes up such a significant portion of CSUN's overall emissions is because we have, 40,000 students and employees coming to campus 3 to 5 times every single week throughout the entire year. So even though we do use, millions of dollars worth of electricity, all those trips add up. The other aspect of it is that our transportation fuels tend to be pretty carbon intensive. And what I mean by that is whenever we burn gasoline in our cars or diesel in buses or trains or jet fuel in planes, that releases a lot of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, where they contribute to climate change and global warming. So from a sustainability perspective, our transportation goals are all about getting people to use lower carbon modes of transportation. So what modes of transportation are we using as a campus right now? Wow, my graphs are all messed up. Oh well. So on the left, we have our student modal split. You can see about 67% of our students drive alone. Second most common form that students use to get to campus would be by walking. Oh, I can pull up the chat. Cool. And then about 8% of our students live on campus. So that's why we have so many people walking to campus. A lot of our students take the bus, carpool as well, or ride their bike, take the train. Over here on the right, we have our faculty modal split. I wish you could see all the labels, but I believe this is about 78%. No, sorry, 86%. 86% of our faculty drive to campus, and then those slices across the top here they correspond over here. So about 5% of our faculty carpool, maybe 1% take the bus, small percentage ride their bike, maybe 2%. We've got a few walkers and a couple people using the train as well. The staff split looks kind of in between these two. So I think about 76% of our staff members drive alone to campus or take a single occupant vehicle. The big difference, I think, between students and faculty and our staff is that 9% of our staff are in a carpool of some sort. So while only 4 and 5% of our faculty and students are are carpooling, almost a tenth of our staff are carpooling, which I think reflects the more regular schedule, as well as coming to campus on a more regular basis. It's harder to coordinate class times than it is to coordinate, an 8 to 5 every single day. So here are some of our commute distances. On the left, you can see the average commute distance of each of our different modes of transit across student, faculty, and staff populations. One of the things that stood out to me was that our student users who take public transit, who take the bus or train, on average have a much shorter commute distance than employees, faculty, and staff who take those same modes of transit. Carpool, is about the same. Driving alone is roughly about the same as well. But for the most part, the big difference you see in those commute distances across those modes are between public transit and not. Over here on the right, we have a graph showing the population distribution of our campus users. And each of these circles represents a 5-mile radius. So as you can see, our population is kind of clustered around the campus. The further you get from campus, obviously, the fewer people, live who are coming to the campus. But as you can see, a very significant portion of our population lives within 10 miles of the campus. I think part of the reason that these averages, tend to be above 10 miles is that we have all these outliers. So, Lancaster, Palmdale, people commuting from Long Beach are going to bump up that average. But as I'll show you on our transportation dashboard later, a very significant portion of our population lives within that 10-mile radius of campus. So jumping a little bit into our transportation initiatives, as I mentioned, we have different programs designed to enable people to use lower carbon modes of transportation or reduce the carbon footprint of a current mode that they have. And we'll look at those in terms of kind of the high carbon modes, single occupant vehicle and carpooling, the medium carbon, I guess you'd call it, which would be the public transit, and then the no carbon, which would be biking and walking. So driving carpool, obviously those are one of the easiest ways to reduce your footprint. Well, maybe not financially easy, but simple and straightforward, I'll say. If you're driving an electric vehicle in LADWP territory, you're emitting about half as many greenhouse gases per mile than if you're driving a standard gas vehicle. So if you switch to an electric vehicle, you've cut your emissions from driving that vehicle in half just right off the bat. That is something that we would like more of our campus users to be able to do. And one of the ways that CSUN has incentivized this is by installing electrical chargers at various locations across campus. We've gotten a lot of feedback around, them not being super convenient to use. One of the things that we've put in place to support that additionally would be clean air parking spaces. So in a few of our parking lots across campus, you'll see certain parking spaces have been painted with that green sticker that you might see on bumpers, like on a car bumper, identifying them as being able to use the HOV lane. So those spaces are reserved for people, with clean air vehicles. And one of the things that this does is that whenever people who charge their vehicle on campus have to move it after 4 hours, because you're only allowed to charge 4 hours at a time, hopefully, they're more likely to be able to find a space to put their car whenever they vacate a charging space, because there will be these other reserved clean air spaces. Another thing that we have is an employee van pool program. So if you have, I believe it takes 9 people to start a van pool, and you need 3 of those 9 people to be able to drive. But at that point, you're not using your own car to commute. One of those 9 people is driving, but the rest can read a book or, just relax and do whatever. And you're also, in terms of the passenger miles, you're dividing that by 9 or more, because you're now, driving one vehicle instead of, one vehicle for 9 people instead of 9 vehicles for 9 people. Carpool matching is another great one. If you have one other person in the car, the emissions per person per mile immediately get cut in half. And CSUN does have a carpool matching service through Zimride, so you can put in your commute times, the days that you come to campus, and I think your zip code or some sort of route information. It'll automatically identify other campus users who might be compatible for carpooling. We also recently launched some parking space counters on a lot of our parking structures that tell you how much or how many parking spaces are left in each of those structures. And it may not seem like a transportation or sustainability initiative, but if you think about it, that means that fewer people are, driving through these parking structures looking for a spot, even though there might not be any spaces. So, by installing these parking space counters, we're hopefully reducing the vehicle circulation among the campus, which is not only reducing the vehicle miles traveled, from just people looking for parking spaces, but will also reduce, the congestion on campus and make it safer for pedestrians and, non-vehicle users to get around campus, since there won't be as many vehicles. We also recently implemented a no idling policy, which is exactly what it sounds like. Basically don't idle on campus. We were working with parking and transportation to kind of figure out how to turn that into an educational opportunity in terms of enforcing that policy. No one is going to be ticketed for it, but it'll more, be to prevent the students parking and then taking a nap in their car, as I, have seen on campus, and I'm sure some of us have as well. Diving more into public transit and those kind of low carbon modes of transit, probably the most visible thing on campus in terms of our public transit offerings would be the transit station, which comes into campus from the west side at Vincennes. So this is a transit station that is served by 4 different buses. We have the 2 Metro bus lines, 167 and 744, as well as the Antelope Valley Transit Authority Express Line 787. So if you're in the Antelope Valley area, you can take that rapid transit bus directly to the campus. The other shuttle that serves the transit station is the CSUN MetroLink shuttle. So I want to say about 1.5 miles off of campus, we have the MetroLink station. And unfortunately, it's easy to travel long distances via the MetroLink train, but getting, that last 1.5 miles from the station to campus is pretty challenging, especially, when it's 110 degrees outside or when it's raining. So the MetroLink shuttle goes back and forth between that station and the CSUN campus. And it's timed to, I believe there are 4 shuttles running right now, but it's timed, to correlate with those, busiest commute times. One of the other things we do is a subsidized transit pass. So I believe students and maybe employees can get a transit pass for $96 per semester, which is significantly cheaper than a regular shuttle pass. I think 2/3 of our student bus riders take advantage of that, and it saves them a significant amount of money, enables them to get to campus more easily as well. We've partnered with Metro on a few other initiatives as well. We share data with them and vice versa in terms of figuring out, what our students need and what they want. So we've provided them with data that is helping inform their planning decisions as well. On that, I guess in that same vein, we've done a number of advocacy events with Metro, where we've held a town hall, on campus where students and employees can come and speak about how, different Metro projects or public transit projects that are in the works might impact them, and how we can, and how Metro can, cite transit stops or, bus rapid transit routes to better support the CSUN community. So in that way, CSUN has done a lot of work in terms of informing our local transit authorities what it is the campus needs, because they know that 40,000 people are going to continue to come to the campus on a regular basis, and the better that they can support that, the less need there will be for parking spaces and other infrastructure to support those single occupancy vehicles. So in terms of biking and walking, kind of the zero carbon or carbon neutral modes of transportation, one thing that CSUN did recently actually was added a whole bunch of new bike racks, and they're also, so they're in more locations, and they're also more secure, so they don't scratch the paint on your bike as easily. They make it easier to lock your bicycle and your wheels to the frame, which will reduce theft significantly. In the surveys we've done, we found that theft is a major concern among bicycle users. So we also offer secure bicycle parking in Matador bike compounds in some of our parking structures. So those are swipe access, and you sign up to be put on the list, and then you're given access, and that way you can store your bike within an enclosed chain link fence with security cameras pointing at it all day, instead of out in a outside or something at an outdoor bike rack that might not have as much visibility or feels less vulnerable. We also have a number of bike maintenance stations around campus. So if you do, end up with a flat tire or just need to tune something up while you're on campus and don't have tools, there are tools available to do that, as well as at the on-campus bike shop, very affordable prices for fixing flats and other things like that. One thing that I really like is our rainy day passes. I bike to campus on a regular basis, and whenever it's raining, really hard and I don't want to bike, I can drive and then just get a rainy day pass. So I think you get 4 per year, and it's exactly what it sounds like. I pull up to the booth and say, hey, I'm on the list for a rainy day pass. And then they give me, a 1-day parking pass that lets me, park in a structure or a lot and not have to pay for it, that $8 for the daily pass. Because if I did have to pay, that a couple times a year, it might be more beneficial for me to just, choose to drive every day. So in that way, we're enabling people to bike without having to commit to a parking pass for those rare occasions when they do need a vehicle. Local employee housing I put on the list because obviously the more we can encourage our faculty and staff to live near campus, the less likely they are to need a vehicle. A shorter commute distance as well. A shorter commute distance enables walking and biking significantly. So yeah, exactly what it sounds like. The more people we can get living close by, the less gas people have to burn to get here. One other thing that we started doing that I'm excited about is user surveys. So we, as I mentioned, the transportation survey that we put out recently contained a few questions about cycling and walking, biking, things like that. And this little bubble chart you see on the right is in response to one of the questions we asked our cyclists. If you do bike to campus, what streets do you use to access the campus? So obviously Lindley Avenue, probably the most popular way that people bike onto the campus. Plummer was also up there. But this helps let us know where we need more bicycle infrastructure, how cyclists are accessing the campus and things like that. On-campus transportation, I think is worth mentioning as well. As I said before, about 1% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from just our fleet vehicles driving around. So the more we can make those electric vehicles, the more we can get that 1% down to 0. So we have worked on electrifying more of our campus vehicles, moving more towards carts, or researching finding EVs for if we retire a Howard truck or something, for example. Shared mobility service is also something that we are looking at. I don't know how many of you remember Limebike, but that is one of the initiatives. I think it was active for about a year, and that was basically a shared bike rental service. So anyone who downloaded the app could rent a bike for 50 cents and then ride it across campus. They're great for getting to meetings, or just if you're running a little behind, if you didn't feel like walking, then you could easily rent a bike and get across campus much faster. Unfortunately, that company terminated their contract with us, and we are in discussions with a few other companies trying to find one who can meet the needs of the campus and is interested and able to operate on our campus. So nothing in the works anytime soon, but it is on our radar for those of you who are pushing to get bike share back. In the meantime, we have been kind of surrounded by all the different scooter companies, so navigating that is an additional challenge. I think well, one of the reasons I put this picture up here is Jacaranda Walk, right? And during those peak migration times, kind of between classes when everyone is moving across campus, even our 20 or 30 foot wide walkways just get completely mobbed. And, adding in skateboards and scooters and carts and, everything to that mix makes it even more complicated. And I took this picture just because, it's one of our busiest walkways on campus, and somebody decided to park their vehicle right there. And, we have a semi truck making a delivery at the same time. So just kind of trying to highlight some of the challenges that we do have on campus in terms of circulation, during those non-peak times when we don't have thousands of people trying to get somewhere all at once. Our infrastructure is definitely capable of handling it, but in those 10-minute windows where it's just kind of a madhouse, it's really hard to designate bike lanes or things like that and navigate all those different physical obstacles that are in place, because we only have so much physical space for building more pathways or dedicated bike lanes or anything of that nature. And one thing that I am looking forward to is doing a traffic circulation study. It's not, well, with everyone being off campus, it's not something that'll be happening anytime soon, but there are some urban planning classes who would be very interested in setting themselves up at certain intersections and tallying the number of cars and carts and cyclists and pedestrians who go by in each direction, which will give us a much better idea of how traffic circulates on campus and how we can modify infrastructure or policies to make it easier for people to get across campus in, regardless of what mode of transportation they're using. Education and awareness I put on here because right now, we have like the dismount zones and things like that, but there's not really much enforcement, and it's kind of the Wild West in terms of what is allowed and what's not. I had a student reach out to me saying, hey, can I bring my own motorized scooter onto the campus? And I was like, oh, that's a question. So I asked parking and transportation, and they were like, oh, you should ask police services. And then police services said, oh, you should probably ask parking and transportation. So there's some hesitance in terms of giving a straight answer on what's okay and what's not. And then I also think that there's just not as much awareness as there could be about, not walking with your headphones in, staring at your phone when there are other people using the campus. So that's something that we are ramping up as part of our bicycle working group. And it's something that I think will be impactful. Looking at the chat right quick. Someone asked about how the no idling policy impacts homeless students who rely upon living on their cars. Okay, so Austin touched on that. Yeah, so there's no overnight parking currently on campus. So in that regard, it wouldn't, people who aren't, I guess that population is already not parked on campus overnight, so it is not likely to impact them. But yeah, I can answer that question in more detail if you're interested. So those are our on-campus, I guess, transportation-related initiatives. I did want to throw up this link right quick, csun.edu/parking/transportation. Lots of great resources on here, all of the different programs I mentioned, the rainy day passes for bicycle commuters, van pool, carpool matching, all of that. You can find a lot more information about all of those things, as well as our subsidized transit pass at this URL. So I'll leave it up for a little while longer, and feel free to check that out on your own time. I'm going to pause for a second. Questions or into our transportation dashboard. All right, can everyone still see the same screen? Or actually, it should be a different screen at this point.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So this is our, not finalized, but in the works, our transportation dashboard. So as I mentioned, we put out a transportation survey about 2 months ago, maybe a month ago now, that was emailed to all of our students on campus. We had over 2,000 responses, and those responses are what we used to build the graphs that I showed you, as well as figure out how that impacts our greenhouse gas inventory and things like that. We also do a commuter survey for our employees for the air quality management district. So we'll be creating a dashboard for employees as well. Right now, this is just our student commuters who replied to that survey. So 2,000 people, 2,500 people, probably a decent sized representative sample of the campus. I will say that I think, well, actually, it says it down here. So student housing responses represented 19% of our total survey responses, but housing students are only 8% of the total student population. So they were slightly overrepresented in our survey results, but you can filter out the student housing responses on a lot of these. So just diving into some of this stuff. What is your primary mode of transportation to the campus? As we already said, driving alone, definitely the most common. Convenience and flexibility was the most popular or the most important factor that the people chose in terms of choosing a different mode of transportation. So whenever we're talking about financial incentives or saving money, saving gas, it really just comes down to the convenience and flexibility for a lot of people, and that's kind of what we're competing with in terms of getting people out of single occupant vehicles, because at this point it is still the most, as painful as it is to sit in traffic, the majority of our campus still considers that to be the most convenient way of getting to and from the campus. So going back to that circular, the concentric ring graph that I showed, or map of where people live, I think this graph illustrates it pretty well. Oops. So as you can see, how many miles do you travel one way to get from home to campus? All of these the bigger dots are obviously the more common responses, and you can find almost every number 1 through 10 in this inner circle of the most popular responses. So 5 and 10 miles were some of the most frequent responses, over 100 for each of those, and we didn't have 100 people for any other number. So once again, even though we do have people driving 70 miles to get to campus, the bulk of our population is very much set within 10 miles of the campus. And then over here on the right, we have commute times, both to campus and from campus back home. So you can see most of our, maybe not most, but a significant portion of our population is definitely under an hour for their commute times. And there are other ways to visualize this data as well that we're exploring with. Let's see, for our single occupant vehicles, this is our gas mileage. We use that to figure out, how many gallons of gas total are used throughout the year, and then convert that to an equivalent amount of, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. One thing that I thought was interesting, so here is the students who use the reduced fare bus pass. We've got most of them saying they do use the pass. Let's see, what else? Looking at bike commuters, so where would a bike lane be most impactful? Lindley Avenue kind of mirrors the what streets people use to enter and exit. We also, got some feedback about what bike-related offerings people would be interested in. We asked questions about the housing shuttle as well. So hopefully this will be up, sometime in the near future on our sustainability website. It will probably be under resources on the transportation dropdown. So keep an eye out for that. If you want, you can also just put your name or email into the chat, and we can, contact you directly whenever this is, whenever this goes live. So Kira pointed out, you can park overnight for 72 hours if you have a parking pass, not the daily ones. I did not know that. Thank you. So that is pretty much all I have in terms of transportation on campus. If anyone wants to, unmute themselves and ask me to click around the dashboard a little bit more, I can do that. Or if there are other questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Any hands going up?
Not that I'm seeing yet.
Well, if there's no more questions, I guess well, thank you all for attending and let you enjoy the rest of your lunch.